The history we think we know is built on a fragile story. Scattered across the globe are artifacts so advanced they seem impossible for their time, each one a silent challenge to our timeline of progress. We will explore 25 of these profound archaeological finds, and by the end, you will see the ancient world through an entirely new lens. How did a 2,000-year-old device predict cosmic events with clockwork precision? And why are stones in Bolivia cut with a perfection that defies simple tools? These mysteries suggest our ancestors may have possessed sophisticated knowledge that was lost to the ages. What does it mean for us if the peak of human technology is not in our future, but buried in our distant past? That corroded lump of bronze was a ghost in the machine of history. When researchers finally began to clean and study the mechanism, they realized they were not looking at a simple astrolabe or a navigational tool. They were holding a miniature cosmos, engineered in metal. Its front face likely displayed the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets across the zodiac. On the back, 2 spiral dials. One tracked the 19-year metonic cycle, which aligns lunar months with the solar year. The other tracked the 18-year Saros cycle, predicting when eclipses would cast their shadow. This was not just a calculator, it was a predictive engine. The most stunning insight is in the gearing itself. To accurately model the moon's irregular orbit, its designers used a brilliantly complex train of gears, including a pin and slot device that mimicked the moon's subtle speeding up and slowing down. This level of mechanical sophistication, this marriage of abstract astronomical theory with precise physical engineering, simply has no parallel in the archaeological record for over 1,000 years. We have to ask, who were these master craftsmen and philosophers? What workshop produced this device, and for whom was it made? The mechanism stands as a solitary, breathtaking data point. It proves that a certain strand of technology, a certain depth of knowledge was achieved, and then it was gone. Its silence in the historical text is as loud as its gears. This pattern of isolated, inexplicable mastery is not unique to the Mediterranean. Far across the ocean, nestled high in the Andes, another ancient site presents a different kind of precision, one carved not in bronze but in stone. The mechanism was a machine of moving parts, but the mystery is one of absolute stillness. Here, on the high Bolivian plain, the stone itself seems to have been persuaded into impossible forms. These are not rough megaliths but components. The most famous are the H-shaped blocks of andesite, a stone harder than granite. Their surfaces are not merely smooth, they are flawlessly flat, meeting at crisp 90-degree angles sharper than any modern chisel could produce without power tools. But the true marvel is in the details unseen at first glance. Across these blocks are precise, intricate notches, T-shaped slots and recessed channels, all cut to depths and widths that are perfectly uniform. They are not decorations, they are engineering features designed to interlock with other, now missing pieces, like parts of a colossal, earthquake-resistant puzzle. This is modular architecture on a megalithic scale. Each cut is identical, each angle repeated, implying the builders worked from a master plan, a set of specifications that allowed for mass production over 1,500 years ago. The conventional explanation of stone hammers, bronze tools, and patient abrasion simply cannot account for this. To achieve such geometric perfection, such unvarying surface flatness across large areas, would require tools that could make perfectly straight, guided cuts with immense pressure and precision. Some researchers point to the possibility of lost techniques, perhaps a method for softening or even casting the stone itself. Others look at the microscopic evidence on the cut surfaces, suggesting the use of advanced saws with diamond-tipped blades, a technology we do not attribute to that time or place. Does not whisper of ancient skill, it shouts of a forgotten industrial standard. It presents a level of craftsmanship so advanced, so systematic, that it stands alien even among other wonders of the ancient world. This pursuit of perfection in stone is a thread that leads us across continents, to a civilization that turned monumental construction into its defining legacy. Granite is a stone that laughs at simple tools. Its crystalline structure, rich in quartz, is one of the hardest natural materials on Earth, demanding respect from even our modern diamond-tipped saws. Yet in the quarries and temples of ancient Egypt, this formidable stone bears marks that tell a silent, confounding story. Scattered among unfinished obelisks and within the shadowy galleries of places like the of Saqqara are the remains of tubular drilling. These are not just holes, they are artifacts of a process. Left behind inside some of these bores are the extracted cores themselves, cylinders of solid granite that tell a precise tale. The surface of these cores and the corresponding borehole walls are marked with clean, consistent spiral grooves. The spacing of these grooves is uniform, indicating a drill that advanced into the rock at a steady, unvarying rate under immense and sustained pressure. This is not the jagged, erratic scarring you would expect from a handheld copper tube being twisted back and forth with sand as an abrasive. That method, when replicated by researchers, produces a rough, conical hole with uneven walls, a far cry from the surgical precision on display in the Egyptian granite and basalt. The ancient drill seems to have bitten into the stone with a confident, mechanical regularity, as if the tool itself was harder than the quartz it was cutting through. Modern machinists and engineers who study these cores, like Christopher, point out a startling fact. The feed rate, the speed at which the drill penetrated the granite, is comparable to what we achieve today with powered coring drills using industrial diamonds. How is this possible in the Bronze Age? A copper tool, even with sand, would have been worn away long before it could cut so deep and so true. The logical, yet staggering, implication is that the ancient craftsmen possessed a lost method, perhaps a tool tip made of a material even harder than the granite itself, or a technique that applied tremendous focused force in a way we have not yet rediscovered. This evidence of machining does not stand alone. It forces our gaze to other stones, cut with a similar, impossible confidence. The granite cores from the quarries present a question of method, but the presents a question of purpose. Hidden below ground level, this vast, water-filled complex feels like a world apart. Its architecture is brutally simple and staggeringly precise. Massive blocks of red granite, each one weighing well over 100 tons, are assembled into a monolithic framework. The joints between these colossal stones are not just tight, they are seamless. In many places, you cannot slip even the thinnest razor blade into the gap. The surfaces are not merely smoothed, they are perfectly flat across spans wider than a person is tall, and the corners meet at crisp, unerring 90-degree angles. This is not the ornate, decorated style of later Egyptian temples. This is Cyclopean architecture, defined by raw geometric power. It bears a striking, almost familial resemblance to the foundational stones of the Valley Temple at Giza, a style that feels profoundly older and more primal than the pyramids that rose above it. The precision here serves a clear, though mysterious, function. Such exacting joins and perfectly leveled surfaces create a structure of immense stability, one that could theoretically withstand seismic forces for. It speaks of a construction philosophy where perfection was not a luxury, but an engineering requirement. How was this achieved? The conventional timeline attributes it to Seti I of the New Kingdom, yet its style and construction technique seem alien to that era. Researchers like John West have pointed out the geological evidence of water erosion on the Sphinx enclosure, suggesting a much wetter climate, and have argued that structures like the and the Giza Valley Temple belong to that far more ancient, forgotten epoch. The methods used remain speculative. Some propose the builders possessed a lost science, perhaps a way to soften stone temporarily using plant extracts or resonant vibrations, making the granite malleable enough to shape and fit with such exactitude. This idea of sound or frequency as a tool connects to legends and sites across the ancient world, hinting at a unified, forgotten physics. It suggests our ancestors may not have just worked stone, they may have understood how to converse with it, to persuade it into form with a knowledge we are only beginning to glimpse. From this underground monument of perfect angles, our journey takes us to a place where geometry was taken to its most famous and enduring extreme. The subterranean precision feels almost intimate in its scale, but the stones of Baalbek defy any human sense of proportion. Here, in the Valley of Lebanon, the ancient platform known as the presents a problem of pure physics. 3 limestone blocks, each one roughly 64 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet deep, form a foundation wall. Their individual weight is estimated at around 800 tons. That is the equivalent of 2 fully loaded jumbo jets, carved from a single piece of stone, transported over a mile from the quarry, and then hoisted over 20 feet into the air to lock perfectly into place. The joints between these behemoths are so tight, so exact, that they mock the idea of primitive construction. But the true testament to an unimaginable ambition lies just down the road in the quarry. There rests the stone of the pregnant woman, a single, lonely block still partially attached to the bedrock. It is even larger, estimated to weigh over 1,000 tons. It was cut, shaped, and undercut, prepared for a journey that never began. This abandoned monolith is the ultimate clue, for it shows us the starting point of a process we cannot replicate even with our modern machinery. Moving such a mass would require a logistical miracle. Contemporary engineers note that the world's largest mobile cranes can lift around 1,200 tons, but only under ideal, controlled conditions on a perfectly prepared modern site. To transport an 800-ton block across uneven terrain and position it with architectural precision using ropes, logs, and manpower alone seems an impossible equation. How did they manage the friction? How did they steer it? How did they prevent the colossal block from sinking into the earth or crushing its own transport system? The Roman builders who later occupied the site and built the magnificent Temple of Jupiter upon this foundation left no records explaining how they, or anyone before them, achieved this. This has led researchers like Graham to a compelling question. Could the Romans have simply found this Cyclopean platform already in place, built by a far older, more technologically capable civilization, and then constructed their own temples upon it? The precision and the sheer, overwhelming scale imply a knowledge of leverage, mass, and inertia that seems to border on the magical. Legends from the region speak of the site being built before the Great Flood, by a race of giants, or with the aid of sound that made the stones weightless. While these are stories, they point to a universal human memory of a time when the rules of construction were different. The purpose of such an immense foundation remains a profound enigma. Was it a landing platform, an anchor for something monumental, or a celestial marker on a global scale? Baalbek does not give up its secrets easily. It simply stands, a monument to a forgotten engineering prowess that challenges our deepest assumptions about the past. From these megaliths that strain the limits of mass, we find a startling contrast in objects that challenge the limits of miniaturization. The shift from 1,000-ton stones to a simple clay jar could not be more dramatic, yet the small object known as the Baghdad Battery presents a mystery of a different magnitude. It is a quiet, unassuming artifact, a pot about the size of a man's fist, dated to the Parthian period around 2,000 years ago. Inside, a copper cylinder was carefully fitted, and within that cylinder, an iron rod was suspended. The whole assembly was sealed at the top with a layer of asphalt, a perfect insulator. When it was discovered in the 1930s, it was catalogued and stored away, a curious oddity. But the engineer and archaeologist looked at it and saw something more. He theorized that if this jar were filled with an acidic liquid, like vinegar or lemon juice, a chemical reaction would occur between the two different metals. This reaction would cause electrons to flow from the iron rod to the copper cylinder through the electrolyte, creating a small but measurable electric current. In essence, it is a simple galvanic cell, the fundamental principle behind every battery we use today. Experiments with replicas have confirmed it works, producing around 1 volt of electricity, enough to create a faint tingle or, theoretically, to electroplate a thin layer of gold onto a silver surface. The conventional counterargument is that it was merely a storage jar for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod acting as a core for the rolled parchment. But this explanation feels incomplete. Why use an expensive copper cylinder as a simple scroll case? And why the meticulous asphalt seal, which would have made accessing any scroll inside incredibly difficult? The battery hypothesis, while not proven, aligns perfectly with the physical evidence. It suggests a culture that was not just aware of static electricity from things like amber, but was actively experimenting with generating a continuous current through chemistry. The output is low, yes, but the principle is flawless. This is not a lucky accident, it is a correct application of a natural law. If this was indeed a battery, what was its purpose? Electroplating small objects for ceremonial use is a compelling idea, a way to make silver appear as gold through a process that would have seemed like magic. Or perhaps it was used for medical purposes, as mild electrical stimulation was known in the ancient world for pain relief. The most profound implication is not the power of this single jar, but the idea it represents. Technology is often a matter of scale. Knowing the principle is the first and most difficult step. Once you understand that 2 different metals in an acid can create electricity, scaling that up is a problem of engineering, not of discovery. Could the Baghdad Battery be a surviving fragment of a larger, lost practice? A single cell is a curiosity, but link dozens of them together in a series, and you have a battery pack capable of meaningful work. We have no archaeological evidence of such an array, but the existence of the core technology invites the question. It hints at a path of development that was either abandoned or lost, a branch of ancient science focused not on levers and pulleys, but on the invisible flow of energy. This concept of harnessing unseen forces for practical use creates a fascinating parallel when we look at another ancient site, one where the stones themselves seem to hold a strange and persistent energy. The idea of ancient electricity moves from a quiet clay jar to the walls of a temple, carved in stone for eternity. Within the crypts of the Hathor Temple at Egypt, there is a series of peculiar reliefs. They show large, bulb-shaped objects, each one held aloft by a pillar. Inside these bulbs, a snake stretches in a straight line, its head touching one end of the container. This serpentine form is connected by what looks like a thick, braided cable to a small box, which is held by a kneeling, priest-like figure. Another figure stands beside the bulb, as if tending to it, with one hand outstretched. To a modern eye, the composition is startlingly familiar. It looks for all the world like a depiction of an early light bulb, with the snake acting as the glowing filament, the pillar as the socket, and the cable running to a power source or a capacitor held by the technician. Mainstream Egyptology offers a very different, deeply symbolic interpretation. Experts identify the bulb as a lotus flower, a powerful symbol of creation and rebirth in Egyptian mythology. The snake emerging from it is the cosmic serpent, representing the first moment of life springing from the primordial waters. The entire scene, they explain, is a visual narrative of a sacred creation myth, not an instruction manual for technology. The kneeling figure is the god, and the box he holds is a pillar, a symbol of stability. This reading is coherent, rooted in decades of scholarship on Egyptian iconography and religious texts. Yet the visual similarity is so uncanny, it continues to spark debate. Alternative researchers, most notably, pointed out that the depiction bears a striking resemblance not just to a simple light bulb, but to a more specific device called a Crookes tube. An early experimental electrical tube that produces a glow when a current is passed through it. This interpretation naturally pairs with the Baghdad Battery theory. Could the temple relief be showing a system? The battery providing the current, the cable conducting it, and the bulb-like vessel containing a gas or vacuum where the electrical discharge, symbolized by the snake, becomes visible light. It is a compelling, if highly speculative, idea. The true puzzle lies in this very tension. It forces us to ask a profound question about ancient communication. When is a symbol just a symbol, and when could it be a stylized representation of a real, physical object? Human cultures have always used the familiar to explain the unfamiliar. If an ancient priestly class did possess knowledge of a glowing electrical phenomenon, how would they record it? They might very well use the most potent symbols at their disposal: the lotus for containment and creation, the serpent for mysterious, linear energy, to encode that knowledge within a sacred context. The reliefs would then be a layered message, holding both a public, mythological meaning for the faithful and a more technical, hidden meaning for the initiated. While the light bulb hypothesis remains on the fringe of archaeology, its enduring appeal highlights our own struggle to interpret the past. We look at these carvings through the lens of our own technological world, and we see what we know. The Egyptians looked at them through the lens of their spiritual world, and they saw the birth of the cosmos. The fascinating possibility is that both interpretations could contain a fragment of a larger, lost truth, a truth where the line between divine mystery and advanced understanding was far thinner than it is today. This blend of potential function and sacred form pushes us to examine objects that have no obvious symbolic meaning at all, artifacts whose purpose seems purely practical. The reliefs present a mystery of interpretation, but the Nimrud Lens is a mystery of pure, undeniable function. Unearthed from the ashes of an Assyrian palace, this 3,000-year-old piece of rock crystal is no ordinary decorative stone. It has been carefully ground into an oval shape, with one perfectly flat face and one that curves outward in a smooth, convex arc. This specific shape is not an accident of nature or simple ornamentation. It is the classic profile of a lens. When you hold it, its purpose becomes clear. Place it over a line of tiny cuneiform script on a clay tablet, and the letters swell into legibility. Aim its curved face toward the sun, and it concentrates the light into a brilliant, hot pinprick capable of igniting tinder. This is not a theoretical property, it is a demonstrable fact. The official museum classification often lists it as an ornamental inlay, perhaps for furniture or a decorative piece, but that explanation feels insufficient. Why go to the immense trouble of shaping such a hard, clear crystal into this precise optical form if the goal was merely to glue it flat onto a surface? The craftsmanship involved suggests intent. Italian scientists studied the lens and proposed a practical use, that Assyrian artisans and jewelers might have used it as a magnifying glass for engraving incredibly fine details onto seals, metalwork, or ivory, work that would be extraordinarily difficult with the naked eye alone. This implies a quiet, workshop-level mastery of optics, a practical understanding of how light bends through a transparent medium to enlarge an image or concentrate energy. The staggering implication is one of chronology. Our historical narrative places the invention of corrective eyeglasses in Italy around the late 13th century, and even simple magnifying glasses are not commonly attested until the medieval period. The Nimrud Lens predates that by well over two. It stands as a solitary data point, asking a profound question. Was this a one-off curiosity, a lucky artifact of a skilled stoneworker? Or is it a single surviving example of a more widespread but perishable technology? Lenses are fragile. They are made of glass or crystal, materials that shatter, get lost, or are melted down. If the Assyrians, or a culture they learned from, were using ground lenses for magnification, what else might they have seen? Could a pair of such lenses, mounted in a tube, have formed a simple telescope? The idea is not as far-fetched as it seems. The Assyrians were avid astronomers, meticulously recording celestial events. The ability to magnify the night sky, to see the phases of Venus or the moons of Jupiter, would have been a monumental advantage, one that could explain certain precise astronomical knowledge that puzzles historians. While we have no archaeological evidence of such a device, the Nimrud Lens proves the foundational knowledge was there, lying dormant in the hands of an ancient craftsman. It represents a road not taken, or perhaps a road forgotten, in humanity's long journey to understand light. From this small crystal that focuses our vision, we find artifacts that seem to focus on mapping the heavens themselves in astonishing detail. A wooden bird rests in a museum case, a silent artifact from a tomb in Saqqara. Carved from sycamore wood over 2,000 years ago, it is a simple, elegant object, labeled as a ceremonial piece or perhaps a child's toy. Yet when you look past that label, something peculiar emerges. This is not a bird in a natural, flapping pose. Its wings are perfectly straight, rigid, and angled downward slightly, a design known as a dihedral that provides inherent stability in flight. Most striking is the tail. It is not horizontal like a bird's tail, but vertical, a straight, flat fin rising from the body. In nature, only one bird has a similar vertical tail, but its tail is feathered and flexible, not a solid, fixed rudder. The Saqqara artifact's tail is an engineering feature, not an anatomical one. This oddity caught the eye of Dr., an Egyptologist with a background in anatomy. He was not the first to see it, but he was the first to seriously ask a radical question. What if this was not a bird at all? What if it was a model? In the late 1960s, proposed that the object was, in fact, a scale model of a monoplane glider. He noted the careful craftsmanship of the wings, their aerofoil cross-section designed to generate lift as air passes over them. The vertical tail, he argued, acted exactly like the rudder on an aircraft, providing directional stability to prevent a spin. To test the idea, researchers built accurate replicas and launched them. The results were quietly astonishing. With a slight upward angle on launch, the models flew. They did not tumble or dive. They glided smoothly for considerable distances, demonstrating stable, aerodynamic properties that no simple toy bird carved by chance would possess. The mainstream archaeological view remains cautious, and rightly so. It could be a stylized representation of a falcon, a sacred bird of the god Horus, with its unique features being artistic license or damage over time. The tomb it was found in held other bird models after all, but the precision of its form creates a persistent, tantalizing doubt. Was this a lucky artistic accident, a shape that just happens to align with principles of flight we later, or does it represent something more? Could it be a physical record of observation and experimentation? The ancient Egyptians were master observers of nature and physics, as seen in their monumental architecture. Did a curious artisan, watching birds soar on thermal currents, try to capture not just their image, but the very secret of their glide? The Saqqara bird sits at a fascinating crossroads. It is too advanced to be easily dismissed as a toy, yet too isolated to prove a technology. It is a single, fragile data point, suggesting that the line between sacred symbol and scientific model might have been far than we think. This idea of encoded knowledge, of a practical principle hidden within a ceremonial form, becomes even more compelling when we look at a collection of objects that seem to defy the very flow of time. The silent glide of the Saqqara bird hints at principles of motion, but the of Easter Island embody motion on a truly monumental scale. These iconic stone giants, gazing inland from their coastal platforms, present a riddle of pure logistics. On one of the most isolated islands on Earth, a society with no metal, no wheels, and no draft animals somehow transported and erected nearly 1,000 statues. The largest standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons. For centuries, the dominant theory involved wooden sledges and log rollers, a method that seemed logical but left unanswered questions about the island's limited timber resources. Then, a compelling alternative emerged not from a textbook, but from the island's own oral tradition. Legends had long spoken of the statues walking across the landscape. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl, working with local descendants, decided to take this poetic idea literally. They assembled a team and a replica, and using nothing but 3 sturdy ropes, they demonstrated a breathtakingly simple yet brilliant technique. By rocking the statue from side to side, coordinating pulls with rhythmic precision, they made the ton figure appear to walk forward, swaying on its curved base. This was not brute force, it was applied physics. The team's understood center of mass, leverage, and kinetic energy, transforming an immense weight into a controlled, rhythmic motion. A small group could move a giant miles across the island's rolling hills. The carving itself, done with handheld stone tools called on the volcanic tuff of the quarry, shows another layer of sophisticated knowledge. Each was shaped in, released from the bedrock in a way that maximized the stone's natural grain for strength. But the final act of engineering is perhaps the most staggering. After the statue was walked to its platform, the Ahu, the builders then had to place the massive red scoria stone, or topknot, on its head. Some of these cylindrical hats weigh over 10 tons. The likely method involved building an earthen ramp behind the erected, and then carefully inching up this slope using levers and ropes until it could be pivoted into place. Every step of this process, from quarry to capstone, required meticulous planning, expert coordination, and a deep, intuitive mastery of materials and mechanics. This was not a technology imported from a more advanced civilization. Easter Island's extreme isolation makes that clear. This was innovation born of necessity and cultivated in a vacuum, a testament to human ingenuity flourishing against all odds. It shows us that advanced problem-solving is not the sole property of connected, resource-rich empires. Sometimes it emerges in the quietest, most remote corners of the world, proving that the drive to build, to create meaning in stone, is a universal human spark. This pattern of isolated genius developing unique solutions forces us to look at another ancient culture. One that faced a very different environmental challenge and answered it with a technology that still nourishes people today. The stone giants of Easter Island were moved with a rhythmic, walking sway, but the spheres of Costa hold a different kind of motion within their perfect stillness. Scattered across the delta, these orbs seem almost alien in their geometric purity. Crafted by the pre-Columbian culture, they range from the size of a grapefruit to colossal spheres over 2 meters across, weighing several tons. Their material is often gabbro, a hard, igneous rock, yet they are shaped with a sphericity that is frequently within mere millimeters of perfection. To carve a near-perfect sphere from such resistant stone is a staggering technical challenge. It requires more than patience, it demands advanced geometric understanding. The artisans needed to maintain a consistent radius from a single, invisible center point throughout the entire shaping process, a task impossible without sophisticated measuring techniques or templates. How did they achieve this? Archaeologist David Hatcher has explored the possibilities, suggesting a stage process. The builders may have first rough-shaped the stone using fire, heating the surface, and then rapidly cooling it to create fractures, before moving to the meticulous work of pecking with other stones, and finally grinding with sand to achieve that breathtaking, smooth curvature. This implies a profound, hands-on knowledge of material science, understanding how heat stress affects different types of rock. But the greater mystery is not how they were made, but why. Their purpose is completely lost to us. Some spheres were found arranged in lines or geometric patterns, leading to theories they were astronomical markers, aligning with solstice sunrises or important stars. Others believe they were symbols of power and status, the larger spheres denoting the authority of a chief or a clan, much like the Didon. Yet, this very sophistication creates a historical puzzle. The material culture of the people, while advanced for the region, does not otherwise display this level of precise, large-scale stoneworking. The spheres stand as an isolated technological peak, a specialized art form that appears, flourishes, and then vanishes. They hint at a society where a specific, sacred knowledge was concentrated, perhaps within a guild of master craftsmen whose techniques were never written down, only passed through touch and tradition until that chain was broken. These silent orbs do not proclaim their meaning. They simply exist, embodiments of a forgotten standard of precision, reminding us that ancient cultures could achieve localized mastery that seems disconnected from everything else they left behind. This drive to encode celestial knowledge into the landscape, to mark the heavens with stone, is a thread that leads us to a hillside in England, where the alignment is not of spheres, but of towering, timeless sentinels. High on a sun-baked cliff in Canyon, a silent drama of light and shadow plays out once a year. The sun dagger of Butte is not a tool, but a clock, a calendar carved into the living rock by the ancestral over 1,000 years ago. Here, 3 enormous stone slabs, each weighing several tons, lean against the cliff face. They were not placed randomly. Their positions are a masterwork of celestial engineering, creating narrow slits that act like the aperture of a giant camera. Behind them, carved into the sandstone, are 2 spiral petroglyphs. For most of the year, these spirals sit in quiet shadow, but on specific, crucial days, something extraordinary happens. As the sun climbs to its zenith, razor-thin daggers of sunlight spear through the precise gaps between the slabs. At noon on the summer solstice, A single brilliant dagger of light slices perfectly down the center of the larger spiral, piercing its heart. On the winter solstice, two distinct daggers of light bracket the spiral, framing it in luminous parentheses. During the equinoxes, a small, detached oval of light appears, touching the center of the smaller, companion spiral. The effect is breathtaking in its accuracy. This was not a lucky accident of erosion. The slabs had to be positioned with incredible care, requiring a deep, long-term understanding of the sun's changing path across the sky throughout the year. The builders needed to know exactly where the sun would be at a specific hour on a specific day, and then engineer a ton-stone structure to filter that light into a specific, meaningful pattern on a specific point on the wall. This is astronomy translated into architecture. It represents a written, monumental form of scientific knowledge, a way of encoding the passage of seasons, the rhythm of the agricultural cycle, and perhaps even sacred cosmology into the landscape itself. The discovery of the site in 1977 by artist Anna opened a window into the sophisticated mind of this ancient culture. It shows us that advanced understanding does not require written formulas or metal tools. It can be built from patience, observation, and stone, a permanent testament to a people who watched the heavens and learned to tell their story with sunlight. This profound integration of celestial cycles into sacred space is a theme that echoes across the ancient world, from the deserts of the American Southwest to the green plains of the British Isles. The sun dagger is a singular solar spotlight, but in the fields of Germany, an entire theater was built for the sky. The circle is a whisper from a time before metal, before the wheel, before written word. Constructed around 4900 BCE by a Neolithic people known as the stroke-ornamented ware culture. This simple ring of wooden posts and earthen banks is one of the oldest known solar observatories on Earth. Today, its outline is reconstructed, a perfect circle with 3 openings or gates cut through its perimeter. To the casual visitor, it might look like a large, empty roundel. But stand at its center on a specific morning, and the genius of its design reveals itself. As dawn breaks on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the rising sun aligns perfectly with the southeastern gate. Its light streams directly into the circle's heart. At sunset on that same pivotal day, the sun sinks in alignment with the southwestern gate. The same precise alignment occurs for the summer solstice through the northeastern gate. This was no accident. The builders spent generations watching the horizon, noting where the sun's rising and setting points crept along the land before reversing direction. They then translated that slow celestial dance into a permanent communal monument. Using nothing but wooden stakes and rope, they achieved a level of geometric and astronomical precision that the year's most critical turning points. This knowledge was survival technology. Knowing precisely when the sun would begin its return, bringing longer days and warmth, was essential for planning the agricultural cycle, for knowing when to sow and when to reap. But it was likely more than a farmer's almanac. The solstice events, framed by these sacred gates, would have been moments of profound communal ritual, gatherings that reinforced social bonds and connected the people to the cosmic order. The circle forces a quiet revolution in how we view prehistory. It tells us that sophisticated astronomical understanding was not invented by the pyramid builders or the stargazers of Babylon. It was a fundamental human pursuit, emerging independently across the globe, wherever people looked up and wondered. The drive to measure time, to predict the seasons, to find our place in the cosmos, is a technology as old as settled society itself. This ancient calendar of posts and earth shows that the first step toward advanced science was not a complex machine, but a simple, deliberate act of observation, repeated and remembered until it could be carved into the very landscape. Against the backdrop of India's monsoon rains and scorching heat, a single iron column has the very nature of its material for over 1,600 years. The iron pillar of Delhi, standing over 23 feet tall in the complex, is not merely old, it is a marvel of ancient engineering. Forged during the prosperous Gupta Empire around the year 400, this pillar presents a silent, stubborn challenge to modern assumptions. Iron, as we all know, rusts. It reacts with oxygen and moisture, turning to a flaky, weak oxide. Yet this massive pillar, exposed to the elements for centuries, remains remarkably free of the deep, destructive corrosion we would expect. Its surface bears a thin, dark protective coating, a patina that has shielded its integrity through countless seasons. The secret lies not in magic, but in sophisticated, empirical chemistry. Metallurgists like Dr. R. have dedicated years to understanding its composition. They discovered the Gupta-era metalworkers used an iron ore with a naturally high phosphorus content and a very low sulfur content. During their unique forging process, this phosphorus combined with the iron to form a stable compound called iron hydrogen phosphate. This compound, along with particles of slag intentionally left within the metal, created a thin, even, and incredibly durable passive layer on the pillar's surface. This layer acts as a permanent, self-renewing barrier against the elements, a shield engineered at the atomic level. The manufacturing feat is equally staggering. Creating a single, solid mass of wrought iron of this size required a level of large-scale smelting and forging that was unparalleled in the ancient world. The prevailing theory is that blacksmiths forged several large, glowing masses of iron, each weighing many tons, and then hammer-welded them together into this monumental shaft while the metal was at a white-hot heat. This process demanded not just immense physical labor, but a profound, hands-on understanding of thermal dynamics and material behavior. They had to maintain a consistent temperature, manage impurities, and achieve a flawless weld along the entire length, all without the precision instruments of a modern foundry. This pillar is not an accident or a lucky survivor. It is the product of a mature, advanced materials science, a technological peak in ancient India that was later lost or diminished. It represents a branch of practical knowledge, where observation and experimentation yielded results that still impress us today. This ancient mastery over the durability of matter makes us wonder what other forgotten substances they might have perfected, substances that could bend light, resist decay, or even, as some legends suggest, capture the very essence of flight. The iron pillar's chemistry was a triumph of bulk material, but a small Roman cup from the 4th century manipulates light itself at an invisible scale. The Lycurgus Cup, a delicate cage cup carved from a single block of glass, holds a secret that seems to defy its age. In normal reflected light, it appears a serene, opaque jade green. But hold a light source behind it, and the entire vessel undergoes a magical transformation, glowing a vibrant, translucent ruby red. This is not a trick of the light, it is a permanent property of the glass, a phenomenon known as dichroism. For over a millennium, this effect was a beautiful mystery. Then, in the 1990s, scientists placed fragments of the cup under powerful electron microscopes. The revelation was astonishing. The Roman glassmakers had, whether by accident or design, impregnated the glass with billions of nanoparticles of gold and silver. These particles are not just small, they are colloidal, ground to a size of about 50 nanometers, roughly 1,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. At this microscopic scale, metals interact with light in strange and wonderful ways. The specific size and distribution of these gold and silver nanoparticles act as a filter, scattering green light when it shines on the cup and allowing red light to pass through when a source is placed behind it. This is not medieval alchemy, it is nanotechnology, a field we associate with the late 20th century. The manufacturing process would have been extraordinarily delicate. The artisans had to create an alloy of gold and silver, grind it to an impossibly fine powder, and then incorporate it into the molten glass batch at just the right temperature and for just the right duration. Too much heat and the particles would dissolve or clump together, ruining the effect. This implies a level of empirical, recipe-based materials science that we do not typically credit to ancient Rome. Was it a fortunate accident, a batch of glass contaminated with gold dust that produced a miraculous result? Or was it the product of generations of quiet experimentation in the workshop, where artisans passed down a secret formula for creating divine light in a drinking vessel? The cup stands alone, a breathtaking outlier. It suggests that the line between ancient craft and advanced science is blurred by the loss of time. How many other recipes, how many other manipulations of matter at the invisible level were discovered in those smoky furnaces and then lost when the workshop closed? The master died without an apprentice. Or the empire fell. The Lycurgus Cup is a single, shimmering data point, proving that our ancestors could achieve effects whose principles they could not possibly articulate in modern terms. They worked with the universe's rules through touch, trial, and observation, sometimes stumbling upon wonders that still leave our finest scientists in awe. A book exists that refuses to be read. In a vault at Yale University rests the manuscript, a codex of about 240 vellum pages that has understanding for centuries. Carbon dated to the early 1400s, its materials are ordinary for its time, but its content is anything but. The pages are filled from edge to edge with a flowing, elegant script in an alphabet that corresponds to no known language on Earth. It is accompanied by illustrations that are at once familiar and profoundly alien. There are detailed drawings of plants that do not grow in any botanical record, their roots and leaves arranged in impossible configurations. There are circular astronomical charts showing unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams. There are pages filled with intricate piping and vessels, and sections depicting dozens of nude women bathing in what appears to be a system of green, interconnected pools. The entire work feels like a scientific or medical textbook from another reality. For over a century, the world's top cryptographers, linguists, and historians have attacked its cipher, employing everything from statistical analysis to artificial intelligence. World War II codebreakers who cracked enemy ciphers turned their skills to thee and walked away baffled. The text has a clear internal structure, with word and sentence patterns that follow the rules of a genuine language, not random gibberish. Yet it yields no key. This has led to a schism in theories. One camp believes it is an elaborate, medieval hoax, a meaningless but carefully constructed artifact designed to fetch a high price from a gullible nobleman. But if it is a hoax, the dedication required to invent an entire linguistic system and fill a book with it, solely for a prank, seems almost more incredible than the alternative. The other camp believes it is exactly what it appears to be, a repository of specialized knowledge, written in a cipher to protect secrets. Some researchers, looking at the strange botanical images, have suggested they could be stylized representations of microscopic cellular structures, a view of plant life invisible to the naked eye. Others see the bathing women diagrams as a symbolic map of human physiology or a guide to therapeutic waters. The most profound implication of the manuscript is not what it says, but that it exists at all. It stands as a stark monument to the fragility of knowledge. It proves that an entire intellectual tradition, with its own language, its own classification of plants and stars, its own understanding of the human body, can vanish so completely that we cannot even begin to translate its last surviving testament. It is a hole in history, a silent scream of lost information. This idea of knowledge encoded not in pages, but in the very earth, leads us to one of the most breathtaking and expansive puzzles on the planet. From the coded pages of a manuscript, we move to a landscape that is itself a giant, open book written on the floor of a desert. The lines are not objects you can hold, but an environment you must fly over to comprehend. Across nearly 200 square miles of Peru's stark pampa, the ancient people removed the dark, oxidized surface stones to reveal the lighter, creamy soil beneath, etching hundreds of figures into the earth. These are not small sketches. A hummingbird stretches over 300 feet, a spider is 150 feet long, a condor's wingspan nears 400 feet. But perhaps more impressive than the zoomorphic figures are the geometric forms, vast trapezoids, triangles and spirals, and especially the straight lines. Some of these lines run arrow-straight for over 30 miles, cutting across rugged terrain, climbing hills and descending into valleys without deviating in the slightest. From the ground, you see only a shallow groove or a cleared path. From the air, the entire breathtaking composition snaps into focus. The technical achievement is monumental. How did they maintain such precision over such vast distances and uneven ground? Archaeologists like the late Maria, who dedicated her life to studying the lines, demonstrated that it could be done with simple technology. Using wooden stakes and long cords, teams could have sighted along the cords to create straight lines. They could have scaled up a small model using a grid system, transferring the design to the desert floor step by step. The real marvel is not the complexity of the tools, but the sophistication of the organization. This was a centuries-long project requiring communal agreement, precise planning, and the disciplined execution of a shared vision across generations. The lines had to be maintained, cleared of the constantly dark pebbles, meaning this was a living, cared-for landscape. But why? Why create art so colossal that you could never see it in its entirety? The most accepted theories are deeply tied to cosmology and survival. Many lines align with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and certain stars on the solstices, suggesting a giant astronomical calendar tied to the agricultural and ritual cycle. Others propose the lines were sacred pathways, walked during ceremonies to invoke life-giving water from the deities, a desperate and beautiful plea in one of the driest places on Earth. This idea transforms the lines from mere pictures into a functional, spiritual technology. The very act of walking the lines, of maintaining them, was a ritual that sustained the community's relationship with the cosmos. The viewpoint from above, then, was not for humans but for the gods. In the worldview, the deities resided in the sky, looking down. These massive glyphs were billboards for the divine, a way to communicate directly with the forces that controlled rain and fertility. This creates a profound inversion of our modern perspective. We see the lines as a puzzle of engineering, a feat of surveying. For though they were likely an act of faith, where the precision of the line, the perfection of the form, was the very essence of the prayer. The technology served the spirit. It was a means to achieve cosmological order, to map the heavens onto the earth in the hope that the heavens would, in turn, bless the earth. This drive to chart the world, to create a permanent record of one's place within it, finds a parallel not in another desert, but in a small, enigmatic disk that seems to hold a frozen moment of ancient navigation. The lines are a prayer etched into the earth, but a map drawn on gazelle skin presents a different kind of supplication, one for safe passage across an unknown world. The map of 1513 is a fragment of a larger world, signed by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer himself, who wrote that he compiled it from 20 source charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. What makes this document so explosively controversial is a small section at its southern edge. Below the familiar coastlines of Africa and South America, the map depicts a landmass. This landmass bears a startling resemblance to the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, but with a detail that defies all historical logic. It shows this coastline not buried under miles of glacial ice, as it has been for millions of years, but as a topographic, ice-free continent with mountains, rivers, and bays. Antarctica was not officially sighted until 1820. How could a 16th century admiral, working with ancient source materials, depict a continent humanity did not yet know existed, and show it as it last appeared perhaps 15 million years ago? This is the core of the mystery that Professor Charles brought to the world's attention in the 1960s. Studying the map with his students, proposed a radical theory. He argued that it had access to source maps and originating from an advanced, pre-classical seafaring civilization that had indeed mapped the entire globe during a warm epoch when Antarctica's coasts were exposed. The map's accuracy, according to, was not a lucky guess, but the faded echo of that lost knowledge. Modern critics point out that the map contains significant errors, and that the southern landmass could be a speculative, mythical continent or a distorted version of South America. Yet the specific correlation remains haunting. In the 1950s, seismic surveys conducted by international scientific teams finally mapped the subglacial topography of Antarctica. The contours they revealed beneath the ice, the mountain ranges and coastal inlets, bore an uncanny resemblance to the shapes on the fragment. Could this be coincidence? If it is not, the implications are staggering. It suggests the existence of an ancient civilization, with not only the ships to undertake global exploration, but the advanced mathematics and astronomy required for precise cartography. They would have needed to understand spherical trigonometry to project a curved Earth onto a flat surface accurately, and possess instruments for reliably determining longitude. A problem Europe would not solve for centuries. The map is a ghost in the archives, a paper-thin whisper of a possibility that rewrites the entire narrative of human discovery. It forces us to ask whether our planet was fully charted not in the age of sail, but in a forgotten age of legend, and that all our modern explorations have been a process of rediscovery. This profound concept of lost global knowledge, of a world once known and then forgotten, creates a perfect bridge to our next category of finds. These are not maps of space, but intricate machines that seem to map time itself, measuring celestial cycles with a precision that feels utterly out of place. A spark plug should never be older than the engine it was meant to ignite. In 1961, 3 rockhounds searching near California cracked open what they believed was a simple geode. Inside the hardened lump, they did not find crystals. They found a cylinder of metallic porcelain surrounding a 2 mm thick core of bright metal, all encased in a sheath of what appeared to be copper. To anyone with even a passing knowledge of 20th century mechanics, the object was unmistakable. It looked exactly like a spark plug from a modern internal combustion engine. The immediate, logical conclusion was that someone had discarded an old plug, and mineral-rich waters had slowly built up layers of concretion around it, creating a convincing-looking nodule. But the finders, Lane, Virginia, and Mike, were experienced collectors. They insisted the encasing material was not a quick-forming calcite deposit, but a genuine geode that would have required, by standard geological measures, hundreds of thousands of years to form. This claim transformed a curious oddity into a profound riddle. If their assessment was correct, then this piece of 20th-century technology was somehow present in North America long before human civilization, let alone the automobile, existed. The object, dubbed the artifact, was X-rayed, and the images revealed more internal complexity, including a tiny metallic pin or spring at one end, furthering its resemblance to a manufactured component. The scientific establishment was understandably skeptical. Geologists who later examined the case argued persuasively that the nodule was not a true geode, but a concretion of iron oxide or desert varnish that can form relatively quickly around a modern object. The most definitive analysis came from the spark plug collectors of America, who identified it as a Champion brand plug from the 1920s, a type commonly used in Ford Model T engines. The mystery, then, seemed neatly solved. Yet the controversy never fully dissipated because it touches on a far deeper and more persistent challenge in archaeology. The artifact is a classic example of what researchers call an out-of-place artifact. Its entire significance hinges not on the object itself, but on the context in which it was found. The finder's interpretation of the geology created an impossible timeline. The expert's reinterpretation brought it back into the familiar historical fold. This tension is the true heart of the mystery. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable fact that our understanding of the past is built on layers of interpretation. We date objects by the strata they are found in, by the minerals that encase them, by the style of their craftsmanship. But what happens when a single piece of evidence seems to break all those rules? Do we dismiss the object as a hoax or a misidentification, or do we question the reliability of our dating methods? The artifact, whether a modern spark plug or something else entirely, serves as a perfect case study in this intellectual conflict. It reminds us that every artifact tells two stories: the story of the object itself and the story of how we choose to understand it. In the end, the greatest lesson of such disputed finds may not be that our history is wrong, but that our methods for uncovering it must always remain open to scrutiny. This dance between material evidence and human interpretation becomes even more delicate when the objects in question are not mechanical, but deeply, intimately human. A single silver coin, smaller than a fingernail, whispers of a journey across an ocean. The Maine Penny is a genuine Norse coin, minted in Norway during the reign of King Olaf between 1065 and 1080. Its discovery, however, was not in a Scandinavian hoard or a European market. It was unearthed in 1957 at the site, a pre-Columbian Native American settlement on the coast of Maine. To the untrained eye, it is a simple, worn disc. To an archaeologist, it is a profound puzzle. The immediate, most logical explanation is that it arrived through long-distance trade networks. Perhaps Norse explorers from the Greenland settlements traded with Arctic peoples, and the coin was passed from hand to hand, tribe to tribe, over hundreds of miles and many generations, until it finally rested in a shell midden in Maine. This is a perfectly plausible scenario, a testament to the vast, interconnected exchange routes that existed long before European colonization. Yet, its lonely presence fuels a deeper, more tantalizing question. Could this coin be a tiny, metallic footprint of something more. The only confirmed Norse site in North America is Meadows in Newfoundland, a small, seasonal settlement occupied for perhaps a decade around the year 1000. The Maine Penny, minted decades later, suggests contact may not have been a single brief event. It hints at the possibility of more extensive exploration, trade, or even fleeting settlement further down the coast. The coin itself is a piece of advanced social technology. Minted currency represents a complex idea, a system of agreed-upon value and state authority stamped into metal. For this object to travel from a Norse mint to a coastal site implies the transfer of more than just silver. It implies the movement of an idea across a cultural chasm. While no one suggests the Native Americans adopted a monetary system from this one coin, its very presence proves that objects, and the concepts they carry, can travel astonishing distances outside of any written history. The Maine Penny's power lies in its ambiguity. It is not a Viking sword or a Norse longhouse, evidence so clear it rewrites textbooks. It is a whisper, a solitary data point that sits at the very edge of possibility. It forces us to hold two truths at once. Yes, it could be a trade item that traveled an extraordinary but terrestrial route. And yes, it could also be a clue that our map of pre-Columbian contact is still missing pieces. It embodies the quiet, persistent challenge of alternative history, where a single, out-of-place artifact can question the boundaries of the known world, reminding us that the past is often more connected and more mysterious than our timelines dare to show. Stories of visitors from the stars are woven into countless cultures, but the tale of the stones presents a unique and tangled mystery. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai was said to have entered a series of remote caves in the mountains. His reported discovery was startling. Alongside skeletal remains of unusually small stature, he found hundreds of stone discs, each about 9 inches across, with a hole in the center and a fine, double spiral groove running from the center to the rim. According to the evolving legend, these were not ordinary stones. Decades later, a scientist named supposedly examined them and made an incredible claim. He said the grooves were not natural, but actually microscopic hieroglyphic writing, a record etched in stone. The translated story was even more astonishing. It told of a group called the whose spacecraft crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago, stranding them on Earth. The narrative, as it spread through popular books and magazines, captured the imagination of a generation hungry for evidence of ancient astronauts. Here, it seemed, was physical proof, a direct account of an extraterrestrial event from the dawn of human history. The problem, however, is one of evidence. No reputable museum or institution has ever displayed or cataloged a stone. The principal figures in the story are obscure, and their alleged findings were never published in any peer-reviewed scientific journal. Mainstream archaeologists and historians widely dismiss the entire account as an elaborate hoax, a modern myth that grew through retelling. They point to a far more mundane explanation. Similar stone discs with central holes are known artifacts in the region, often made of biotite slate. These are commonly identified as bi discs, used historically as fishing net weights or simple spindle whorls. The spiral pattern could be a natural formation of the mineral or a simple decorative carving. The story persists precisely because it touches on a deep human desire, the longing for a definitive, earth-shattering answer that bridges our lonely place in the cosmos. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale within the study of historical mysteries. The allure of a sensational explanation can be so strong that it overshadows the rigorous, often slower process of verification. The stones remind us that extraordinary claims require not just a compelling story, but a clear chain of custody, verifiable analysis, and evidence that can withstand skeptical scrutiny. Separating the spark of a fascinating possibility from the steady flame of established fact is the essential, ongoing work of understanding our past. This dance between compelling narrative and hard evidence leads us to a final, profound category of ancient mystery, one not about stones or metal, but about the very fabric of reality and knowledge itself. The legends of giants and star travelers give way to a landscape dotted with silent, open mouths of stone. In the misty highlands of Laos, the plateau holds a sight that feels both monumental and deeply personal. Scattered across hundreds of square miles, in clusters large and small, sit thousands of massive stone jars. Carved from hard sandstone and granite, they rise from the earth like the work of a forgotten, patient people. Some stand waist-high, others tower over a person, with the largest weighing several tons. Their shapes are deceptively simple, most are cylindrical, while others are rectangular or squared, each one hollowed out with a careful, inward slope. They date to the Iron Age, a period from roughly 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after, yet their origin story is written in a language we have yet to fully decipher. The immediate question is one of pure effort. How did a society without metal tools, in this rugged terrain, quarry such immense blocks, shape them with such consistency, and then distribute them across the landscape? The stone itself provides clues. Researchers have traced the source material to specific quarries, some miles away. This means the finished jars, or the rough blanks from which they were carved, were transported across hills and valleys. The logistics imply a highly organized, communal effort, a society capable of mobilizing labor and coordinating a project that spanned generations. The technological skill here is not about moving a single 1,000-ton block like at Baalbek, but about the systematic production and placement of hundreds of heavy objects according to a widespread shared plan. It speaks of a specialized craft, a stone-working tradition honed for a single profound purpose. But what purpose was that? Local folklore offers a poetic answer, telling of a race of giants who once inhabited the land and used the jars to brew immense quantities of rice wine for their celebrations. Archaeology, however, points to a more solemn use. Excavations around the jars have uncovered human remains, fragments of bone, and burial goods like beads and ceramic pieces. The leading theory suggests these were not storage containers for grain or water, but resting places. They may have been used for a practice known as excarnation, where the bodies of the departed were placed inside the jars to decompose, with the bones later collected for a secondary burial elsewhere. This transforms the jars from simple vessels into sacred, transitional spaces, where the physical body returned to the earth within a crafted stone womb. The mystery deepens when we consider the distribution. The jars are not arranged in neat rows like a cemetery, but in clusters that seem to follow the natural contours of the land, often aligned with mountain passes or overlooking valleys. This placement might reflect clan territories, trade routes, or astrological alignments we no longer perceive. Each jar, perfectly shaped and deliberately positioned, represents a fusion of advanced stone-working technology and intricate spiritual belief. The society that made them left no written records, no grand temples. Their legacy is these silent, open vessels, a technology applied not for war or monument, but for the universal, human need to honor the journey from one state of being to another. They remind us that ancient advancement was not always expressed in gears or lenses. Sometimes it was expressed in the quiet, communal act of carving a perfect space from stone, and placing it on a hillside for reasons that whisper to us across 2,000 years. The silent jars of Laos rest on solid ground, but the sea holds ruins that challenge our entire timeline. Off the coast of Japan's island, the ocean floor drops away into a scene that should not exist. Here, in clear blue water, diver found not a reef or a random rock formation, but what looks unmistakably like a vast, terraced monument. It is a colossal structure of sandstone, rising from the seabed, with flat platforms, sharp, straight walls, and what appear to be wide, symmetrical steps ascending one level to the next. From certain angles, it resembles a stepped pyramid, a grand plaza, or the foundational platform of a temple complex now claimed by the sea. The initial, instinctive reaction is to see the hand of a builder. The edges are too straight, the angles too crisp, the terraces too perfectly level. There are features that look like carved channels, circular depressions, and even a triangular entranceway. If this is a natural formation, it is a geological masterpiece of improbable geometry. The debate that erupted following its discovery centers on this very question. Geologist Robert, who has studied the site extensively, occupies a compelling middle ground. He acknowledges that the sandstone in this region naturally fractures into flat plains and blocks due to its horizontal bedding. Tidal currents and erosion could, over eons, sculpt some of the broader shapes. However, points to specific details that push beyond natural explanation. He highlights perfect 90-degree angles where walls meet, sequences of steps with uniform height and depth, and what seem to be tool marks on certain surfaces. His conclusion is that it is primarily a natural formation that was later modified, enhanced, and carved by human hands for an unknown purpose. It is as if ancient people found a promising geological canvas and decided to finish the work, turning a striking rock formation into a deliberate monument. If human involvement is real, the implications are staggering. The structure now sits at a depth where it would have been completely above ground during the last ice age, when global sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. This pushes its potential construction or modification date back to a time before 10,000 years ago, a prehistoric epoch our history books describe as the domain of hunter-gatherers with simple tools. This timeline does not just adjust a date, it shatters a paradigm. It suggests a culture, now lost beneath the waves, capable of large-scale stoneworking and monumental architecture, before the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Sumer were conceived. This was a time when much of the continental shelf was dry land, creating vast, fertile coastal plains that are now submerged. Would not have been an isolated island structure, but part of a populated coastline. The monument, whether natural or enhanced, speaks directly to a deep and universal human memory. Cultures across the globe, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah, from Plato's tale of Atlantis to the flood myths of indigenous peoples, share a common narrative of a great deluge that swallowed ancient lands and advanced civilizations, stands as a tangible stone anchor for these stories. It represents the possibility that these are not mere myths, but faded recollections of a real geological event. The rapid rise of sea levels at the end of the Ice Age that drowned coastlines and erased entire chapters of human endeavor. The site is a ghost of a drowned world, a silent testament to the fact that the most fertile grounds for early human development, our first cities and monuments, may not be buried under desert sands, but under the relentless weight of the ocean itself. This idea of a lost Pacific civilization, with the technology and will to shape the very bedrock of their world, forces us to look at the map differently, to see the blue not as empty space, but as the graveyard of forgotten shores. The silent, submerged stones speak of a world lost to rising seas, but a small black disk from Colombia presents a loss of a different kind, the loss of a biological secret. The genetic disk is an object that seems to hold the very blueprint of life within its stone. Roughly the size of a dinner plate, this dark stone is carved with intricate, precise illustrations that are startlingly familiar to a modern eye. The images spiral across its surface, and among them, one can clearly identify what looks like a human sperm cell, with its distinct head and tail. Nearby, another symbol resembles a human ovum. Further along, the carvings depict a developing fetus in various stages, from a small cluster of cells to a recognizable human form curled within a womb. To anyone with a basic knowledge of human biology, the narrative is unmistakable. It appears to chart the journey of fertilization and embryonic development, a process invisible to the naked eye, requiring magnification to be understood. This is where the mystery crystallizes into a profound dilemma. The disk reportedly surfaced in Colombia, but with no documented archaeological context, no excavation site, and no chain of custody linking it to a pre-Columbian culture. It simply appeared in the private antiquities market, a fact that immediately casts a long shadow of doubt. For mainstream archaeologists, this lack of provenance is fatal. The field operates on a fundamental principle: an object's story is only as strong as the documented soil it came from. Without that, the genetic disk joins a crowded gallery of curious forgeries, objects crafted to appeal to our desire for the inexplicable. The biological precision itself is seen as the very evidence of its modern origin, a clever artist using a 20th century textbook as a reference. Yet, for those who argue for its authenticity, the disk represents something far more revolutionary. If it is genuine, it implies that an ancient culture in South America possessed a detailed, microscopic understanding of human reproduction 1,000 years or more before the invention of the microscope. How could they have known? The implications spiral outward. Did they develop advanced optical lenses, like a more refined version of the Nimrud Lens, that have simply not survived? Or did their knowledge come from a different, perhaps more intuitive, path of observation and deduction? The disk forces a stark confrontation between two ways of seeing the past. On one side is the rigorous, methodical framework of established archaeology, which must guard against hoaxes to protect the integrity of history. On the other is the tantalizing possibility that our timeline is incomplete, that flashes of advanced understanding could appear in isolated pockets, later to be buried, lost, or dismissed as impossible. The genetic disk, whether a modern fabrication or a relic of forgotten science, ultimately teaches a critical lesson about the search for truth. Extraordinary claims do not just require extraordinary evidence, they require evidence that can be tested and placed within a web of corroborating facts. It reminds us that the most seductive mysteries are often those that speak directly to our modern knowledge, reflecting our own world back at us from the depths of time. The challenge is to look past that reflection, to discern whether we are seeing a window into an ancient mind or simply a mirror of our own desires. This dance between evidence and interpretation, between revolutionary discovery and the meticulous standards of proof, brings us to the final find on our journey. An artifact that does not question a single technology, but the very fabric of our historical consciousness. The final artifact on our list is not one of metal or crystal, but of simple river stone, etched with scenes that defy the very bedrock of natural history. From the region of Peru, thousands of these andesite rocks bear intricate engravings, a vast and bizarre gallery carved into stone. The images are startling, to say the least. They show human figures, dressed in what looks like ancient garb, interacting directly with creatures we recognize as dinosaurs, some even appearing to ride upon their backs. Other stones depict what seem to be advanced medical procedures, with detailed illustrations of open-heart surgery and what could be organ transplants. Still others show complex astronomical charts and maps of unknown continents. This collection was brought to the world's attention by a local physician, Dr. who amassed a huge number of them and argued they were genuine records of an antediluvian civilization that possessed knowledge far beyond our own. The mainstream scientific verdict, however, is nearly unanimous. Geologists who have examined the stones point out that the engravings show no signs of the natural weathering or patina one would expect on ancient artifacts. The lines are fresh, sharp, and sit atop the stone's own aged surface, a clear indicator of recent work. Furthermore, in the 1970s, local farmers admitted to creating the stones themselves, using simple tools and their own imaginations, often inspired by comic books, textbooks, and popular films. To sell to eager tourists and collectors, the stones are not a mystery of ancient technology, but a profound case study in modern mythology. Their power lies not in what they reveal about the past, but in what they reveal about us. They demonstrate the immense, human desire to find evidence for a different, more wondrous history, one where humans walked with giants and possessed lost sciences. They show how that longing can manifest in physical objects, and how those objects can then fuel elaborate narratives that feel more satisfying than the often gradual, complex truth uncovered by archaeology. The stones serve as a critical reminder of the discipline's constant vigilance. For every genuine, puzzling artifact like the mechanism, there may be dozens of clever forgeries waiting to be woven into a compelling, but false, story. They underscore that separating signal from noise requires not just curiosity, but rigorous skepticism, provenance, and a willingness to follow the evidence even when it leads to a mundane conclusion. So, after this journey through 25 of the world's most perplexing archaeological finds, from confirmed marvels to contested curiosities to exposed hoaxes, we are left with a single, overarching question. What does this collective body of evidence, in all its messy, contradictory glory, actually suggest about our ancient past? These scattered pieces form a pattern when seen from a distance. The impossible precision in stone, the celestial calendars etched into rock and landscape, the mastery of materials from iron to glass at a microscopic scale, the persistent depictions of knowledge that seems out of time. These are not just isolated curiosities, they are echoes. What they echo is a profound rethinking of the human story. The traditional view of history is a straight line, a steady climb from simple stone tools to complex silicon chips. But the artifacts we have explored suggest a different shape, one of peaks and valleys. They hint at periods of intense, localized innovation, where a culture might achieve a breathtaking mastery in one specific domain, like of the mechanism or the anti-corrosion chemistry of the Delhi pillar, only for that knowledge to later fade, forgotten in the ruins or lost beneath the waves. Sometimes this loss was sudden, a coastline swallowed by rising seas at the end of the last ice age, potentially taking with it the builders of sites like. Other times it was gradual, the slow unraveling of a social order, the death of a master craftsperson without an apprentice, or the simple fragility of parchment and oral tradition in a world of conflict and change. The scholar John offered a compelling lens for this. He suggested ancient cultures may have cultivated a science of the subtle, an intuitive and experiential understanding of natural forces, resonance, and the geometry of the earth itself. which they applied to their monumental works. This was not our science of equations and particle accelerators, but a science of harmony, of aligning human creation with perceived cosmic principles. Whether through such a subtle science or through more familiar paths of trial and observation, the evidence compels a more humble view. Our ancestors were not primitive people stumbling toward enlightenment. They were keen observers, brilliant engineers, and profound thinkers whose achievements, in certain times and places, may have rivaled or even surpassed our own in specific ways. The tapestry of history is not a single, woven thread ascending. It is a rich, complex fabric, with some threads shining brilliantly for a time before being woven under, waiting to be glimpsed again. This perspective does not diminish our modern world, but it does expand our sense of human potential. It asks us to look at the silent stones and rusted fragments not as puzzles to be solved with our superior knowledge, but as messages from intelligences that were, in their own context, equally advanced. The greatest discovery may not be a single artifact, but a new way of seeing, an openness to the idea that progress is not a monopoly of the present, and that the whispers from our deep past are worth listening to with fresh and deeply respectful ears. Our journey through these 25 artifacts paints a portrait of a past that refuses to be simple. While any single find can be debated, explained away, or labeled an anomaly, their collective presence forms a pattern too persistent to ignore. They are the scattered pieces of a puzzle for which we have lost the box top image. Some of these pieces may indeed fit into our conventional timeline with further study, while others may prove to be clever forgeries or honest misinterpretations. Yet even the act of questioning them serves a vital purpose. It challenges the comforting but perhaps incomplete story of linear human progress, that steady, upward march from primitive to advanced. Instead, we see a landscape of brilliant, isolated peaks, of technologies that flash into existence and then vanish for centuries. This pattern suggests a different rhythm to history, one of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. Our knowledge is not a permanent pyramid we build upon, but a flickering flame, sometimes burning bright in one corner of the world while it gutters out in another. History, as the saying goes, is written by the survivors, but it is also written by those with durable materials and stable institutions. The true narrative is far more fragile, subject to the slow erosion of time, the sudden catastrophe of natural disaster, or the quiet tragedy of a master craftsperson taking a secret to their final resting place. The quest ahead, then, is a delicate balance. It requires the open-mindedness to consider radical possibilities, paired with the rigorous skepticism of the scientific method. We must be willing to let the evidence lead, even when it points to uncomfortable conclusions that rewrite chapters we thought were finished. As we develop new tools for analysis, from ground-penetrating radar to advanced material science, we may yet decipher the true stories encoded in these stones and metals. So we leave you with a question to ponder, a shift in perspective. If our own global civilization were to vanish tomorrow, what would remain? Our skyscrapers would crumble, our digital clouds would evaporate into silence. Future archaeologists might unearth a smartphone, its glass screen and mysterious circuitry completely alien, its purpose a matter of fierce debate. They might find a porcelain toilet and wonder at its ceremonial function. Our most advanced technologies are often our most ephemeral. This reflection is not meant to diminish our achievements, but to foster a profound humility and a deeper connection to those who came before. They too were problem solvers, artists, and engineers, looking at the same stars and asking the same fundamental questions. If this exploration into the edges of history has sparked your curiosity, we invite you to join us for more. Subscribe for deeper journeys into the world's greatest puzzles, and let us know in the comments, which of these 25 finds do you find the most compelling? The one that truly makes you question the story you were told. The past is not a closed book sitting on a shelf. It is an active dig site, and with every new discovery, we turn another page.